Hi there, my name's Andre Bernier. I'm a Los Angeles-based keys and bass player, and today I want to talk about if you should get an Electro or a Stage 4. Let's get into it. So my journey with Nord started with a Nord Piano 3, which was a very nice board, but it was 88 keys. It was huge, and it didn't have any organ on it. It had a sample synth section, and it had a piano section, but no dedicated organ section. So eventually I started wanting an organ that was on board that board so I could bring that to gigs and not have to bring my Hammond SK1, which is a deeply ugly board, but sounds amazing, but I just hated hauling it just for the sake of Hammond. So enter the Electro 6D. I bought the Electro 6D because I couldn't afford the Stage 3, and also because I wanted sort of a smaller form factor. It'd be easier to load in and load out. And that still is true. That is the best load in, load out I've ever had with any keyboard of all time, ever. So if that's what's important to you, you can pretty much stop watching the video right now. But eventually I did end up upgrading to the Stage 4, and I kind of want to go over some reasons why maybe you would think to do that, or maybe reasons why you probably don't need a Stage 4 at all and the Electro is perfectly good. Let me say this. For most people, I don't think you need the Stage 4. And I've been on several forums where people have said, our church is looking for a keyboard. Should we get the Stage 3 or Stage 4, or should we get an Electro? And everyone's always like, man, if you don't get the Stage, you're gonna regret it. Later on, you're gonna regret it. I disagree with this philosophy, fundamentally. I don't think that's true. For the vast majority of use cases, I think the Electro is not only better bang for buck, but actually better for usability and use case, especially by novice users, than the Stage 4 is. So I want to break down some pros for the Electro and break down some pros for the Stage 4 and just go from there. So I should say it's 2025 and these apply to the Electro 6D because that is the model that I am most familiar with. I would look at the Electro 6D over any of the older models such as the 5D because of the seamless program changes. That's a huge deal. Also the LED screen is just way better and I prefer the layout of it. All of Nord's keyboards are slowly getting modernized to have that same screen, and that same screen makes it really easy to hop between boards and understand what's going on and what's where. If you're on a 5D, you're probably not going to understand a Stage 4 as well as if you're on a 6D and you have to on the fly learn a Stage 4, which is a scenario you may find yourself in at, let's say, a jam session or even worse, a gig where they have backline for you. Something to consider. But also I say it's 2025 and I'm talking about the Electro 6D because the 7D is pretty overdue at this point. I mean, I don't know when they released the 6D, but probably 2017? When did the Stage 3 come out? 2016, the Stage 3 came out. So they released the Electro 6D after the Stage 3 and improved some things like the EQ section, for instance, on the piano section. But yeah, it's old tech at this point. I think that's fair to say. It's old tech and everything else has kind of gotten modernized. Their piano line has gotten modernized. The Stage 4, goodness knows, has gotten modernized. I think we're really overdue for an Electro overhaul, and there's a couple things I'd like to see, which I will cover at the end of this video. So let's get into it. Electro pros. Number one, it is the same quality of sounds on the Electro as on the Stage 4 when it comes to organs and it comes to piano. I know some people are gonna say, well, it doesn't have the synth section. We'll get to that. That's a different argument. All of the pianos that I think of as the flagship sounds of Nord's, the Stockholm Rhodes and the White Grand, you can get those no problem onto your Electro board. And they're the same exact quality that you will find on the flagship $5,000 Stage 4. That is something huge to consider because there's no real reason to spend this gigantic upcharge thinking you're gonna get better fidelity. It doesn't work like that. Now, interestingly, owning both boards, I have A/B'd them. I do think there's a difference in audio quality. Ironically, the Stage 4 is a little bit darker, which is not what you'd necessarily expect from a more expensive instrument. A lot of times those are brighter or more pop capable is how I'd say it. It's a deeply dark board and you actually have to work to bring it up to the brightness required for many live shows, which is sort of strange for a board called the Stage. All I'll say is this though, to wrap this section up, I am deeply happy with how the Electro's quality is when it comes to piano reproduction and organ reproduction. I hear no fundamental difference between the organ engine and the piano sample sound, string resonance included, between the Electro 6D and the Stage 4. Reason number two, it's affordable. Now this is a big deal because my actual thought process when I was first getting this Electro was, okay, I could buy, at this point the Stage 4 wasn't out yet, so I could buy a Stage 3 for what would have been $4,000 at that point. Or I could get an Electro used, highly recommend buying everything used. I got it used from Armen's on Reverb. great shop. I could get an Electro used for $1,800 and then pick up a Profit Rev 2 for $1,500. And those together would be $3,300, which is still a lot less than the Stage 3. And arguably a better, more authentic synth sound and the exact same piano and organ engines that you would find on the Stage 3. It's not a bad deal, is it? Now, prices have come up, but prices have come up on the Stage 4. Do I think the Stage 4 is worth getting over the Stage 3? Yes, I do. So I wouldn't even consider the Stage 3 in contention anymore. Now it's more like $5,399 versus $22,000 used for an Electro 6D. It's just a bunch of money, man. Keyboards are so much money. Holy God, bro. I couldn't afford shit in Nashville, dude. Let me tell you what. None of that's the point. Affordability is that second point. But this also manifests itself in different ways. For instance, when I'm going to a gig, I really do think about how much gear do I want to bring to this thing, right? I'm going to be playing at NAMM later on this month. That's exciting, but I'm going to have to kind of keep my keyboard in my car, which is a little bit sketchy in LA. Just don't keep instruments in your car in general. But I'm going to have to keep it in the car while I walk around the trade show because there's not going to be anywhere to leave it. Well, okay. Do I want to keep a flight case with a Stage 4 in my trunk? Or, out of sight, do I want to keep a 61 key Electro? Kind of a no-brainer, right? I would rather keep the smaller, cheaper board out of sight and risk that rather than risking the Stage 4. And you can say to me, you shouldn't do that in the first place. You're right. But a lot of times in touring and in gigging, we don't really get a choice about where our gear ends up. I have a choice in this matter. I'm just saying, a lot of times, we don't have a choice. You know, they can only back the trailer up to so many walls at hotels on tour before it just becomes like, all right, man, we're just gonna see what happens and it's all insured anyways. You don't wanna lose a $5,000 board that way. I'd much rather lose the $1,800 board that way. Speaking of touring, this brings me to the third point, size. Size. This is a massive one. I mentioned in the intro, I've never had a better loadout than with the Electro 6D. That is true. I have this fantastic mono bag. Fantastic 61 key mono bag that goes on my back. It's a backpack case. Oh my God, dude, it's a revelation. When I first got this, I could not believe the difference in load in and load out from working with a fully weighted 88 key keyboard before that. By the way, I had the whole thing. I had the $500 Nord case with the wheels. I think it was heavy, bro. I think it was heavy. And so rolling up with this thing on my back was incredible, especially when it was something fast. Like there's a thing called Whiskey Jam in Nashville. I played that a couple times and you have to go through this crowded room in this bar to get to the stage. That's tough to do with a fully weighted keyboard, but with an Electro, it's easy, right? You just walk right up, excuse me, there we go, boom. Stand in one hand, QSC in the other, stand, play it, done. Sold. One trip, load in, load out. Love that. So from that perspective, that's amazing. The other thing I'll mention is this, because I don't see it posted online a lot. You can actually fit an Electro 60, the 61 key model, with this mono bag into the overhead compartment on an airplane. Let me repeat that. You could fit this Electro 60, 61 key, into the overhead compartment on a commercial airplane and fly anywhere you'd like with it. That's pretty crazy. Now, things are getting dicey right now with that. They've sort of amended some laws that says they have to let you put it in the overhead bin, and that makes me really nervous. I wouldn't try to get it on board anymore like that, but it's something to know. And when it comes to flying for short fly dates, I flew to Vegas from Nashville to do a thing with this. When it comes to touring, the tour I just did with Carter, we had to do a very quick pack down and very quick setup, you know, to be on an opening slot. Yeah. I'm gonna bring a board that's easy to maneuver. Stage presence kind of be damned. It's all about functionality. Same thing goes for sessions. If someone says, I need you to come over and do this thing, maybe I just bring the 61 key. It stays packed up. It's easy. It's by the door. It goes right on my back. I don't really need the key feel, and it sounds, like I said in the intro, exactly the same as the Stage 4. So that concludes our Electro section. And I'll say this just to sum it up. If you're a person that does this as a side thing, right? Like you're a guitar player, but you want to play some keys in your band. Or maybe you're a producer and you're wondering, do I really need the synth capability of the Stage 4, or could I just get the Electro? My recommendation is the Electro every day of the week. Every day of the week, for most people, right? Because you don't need the most professional stage touring Taylor Swift level gear to do basic piano patches and things like that. In fact, the artist that I work with all the time, Carter Vale, was looking for a keyboard for his studio, and I told him, I'll set up your Electro for you. And he uses it all the time. The whirly patch is fantastic. And again, the same one you find on the flagship. So there's lots of use cases for these boards within your workflow that don't require you having the $5,300 one. Let's talk about some pros of the Stage 4, because I did end up upgrading to the Stage 4. It's right behind me on this side. I can't see this monitor. There it is, right there. That's the one. And I do use it all the time. It's my main gigging board. There are reasons that I use this board. There are reasons this board is my favorite board and why I use it. So I want to get into what are the pros of the Nord Stage 4. Number one, this is gigantic. Feel. The feel of the Stage 4 is immaculate. It is a very expensive board. It feels like a very expensive board. So let's start here. If you're unfamiliar with what the different key feels are for the Nord keyboard lineup, it is as follows. You have waterfall action. This is what is on the Stage 4 Compact, right? The unweighted one. And it's what's on the Electro 6D. This waterfall action is supposed to be a hybrid between the electric piano feel and the organ feel. I don't understand that at all, having played a bunch of real organs and electric pianos. I don't think it's a great middle ground for those two. I would just call it unweighted. It feels like an unweighted keyboard more than it feels like either of those two things. It has neither the key depth of the organ, which is very shallow and very pleasant to play. If you've ever played a real Hammond with a beautiful, lovely, spongy click to it. It doesn't have any of that. And it also doesn't have the give back and tactile sensitivity of something like a Fender Rhodes or a Wurlitzer. It's misleading, and I just don't think it represents either of those camps. But that is the waterfall key action. Not great. It's okay, and it's lightweight, which is a plus. This brings us to the most controversial action, Hammer Portable. Now, this is actually being slowly phased out because of all the bad things people have said about it, but previous models that included this were the Stage 3 Hammer Portable model, their 76 key model, and the Electro 6D HP76. All you need to know about this action is you shouldn't get it. What people have said is over time it develops a mushiness to it as well as a clicking sound that can be heard. This is no good. In my opinion, the actual weight that you're saving is not worth the loss in quality that comes from going from Hammer Action to Hammer Portable. Just go all the way to waterfall, get the absolute lightest one, or get the Hammer Action, in my opinion. But this brings us to Hammer Action. Previously, Hammer Action, which is the best action, was only available in the 88 key models of Nord's lineup. This includes the Stage 3, which for some reason still had those terrible LED drawbars. Don't at me in the comments, those are bad. It was a bad decision, a bad choice, and I stand by that. I'm so happy they're phasing that out and learning their way. Also, I don't want motorized drawbars, but that's a different video. But they did something interesting with the Piano 5. The Piano 5, they released a 73 key model, Hammer Action. Well, this changed everything. As soon as they did that, I said the Stage 4 is absolutely going to have a 73 key model that has Hammer Action. Sure enough, that came out. When I tell you every single keyboardist in LA is using this board, they're all using this board. And the reason is, it's the perfect trade-off. You have the Hammer Action feel, but then you also have the lighter weight that comes from taking away the extreme register ends of a piano. You don't really need those in a day-to-day gigging scenario. And if you really do, you can just ride the transpose buttons. It's not a big deal. But the Electro doesn't have any Hammer Action. The Electro still has, part of the reason I say it's due for an update, that Hammer Portable one. And no one's really happy with that action. It is my gravest hope that they release a Hammer Action Electro, because it would actually change everything. I say this honestly, Nord, if you're listening, and you're not, but if you were, if you release a 61 key, physical drawbars, Hammer Action, Electro, 7D, I will buy it the day it comes out. The day it comes out, I will purchase that board because it has all of the portability that I crave with all of the feel that I desire. I can lose the synth section. I'll be okay without the synth section for some of these gigs. Not all the gigs. Some of these gigs just don't require that. You're doing Americana, you're doing country, you're doing folk, you're doing anything that's a coffee house, you're a singer-songwriter yourself and you don't really need to have weird James Blakey type synths. Yeah, dog, just get the Electro, get the piano. I mean, for that, honestly. But all this is to say, the feel is vastly better on the Stage 4, and it makes me play better. And if it makes me play better, I get called more. And so I do use the Stage 4 in my gigging day to day much more often than the Electro. I got okay at soloing on the Electro, but it always felt like I was typing a solo. It never felt like I was actually expressing myself. Number 2, the synth engine. The synth engine is a big one, and it's what most people point to. I still would argue if you're a producer, you are going to be far better served by getting Arturia for a fraction of the price. Just get the complete collection of what it would cost to go from an Electro to a Stage 4, a fraction of the price of that. And use VSTs. Because A, they actually model real synths, so you can say, I want an Oberheim. You have an Oberheim. Oh, I want a Juno. I want a Juno. And if you don't know what these are, you're better off learning what those are and kind of going through and learning the history of those instruments and how to use them, or using presets on Arturia even. Then you are better, preset diving on a dedicated stage keyboard. It's just not really for that. Now, I use the synth every time I gig, and it's great. It's great for modeling stuff. It's a modeling digital analog synthesizer, so there's nothing analog about it. But it sounds pretty good, and you can fool your way to a Juno sound if you use the chorus cutely, and it's got a nice, sort of a, doubling sort of feature, which is great. Yeah, it's very usable. It's just not the greatest synth out there, especially when you consider the price point. And so if you're not using this on stage, I don't really think you need that synth section at all, period. I don't. I think you'd be so much better buying the Electro and a dedicated synth for, again, less money together than what the Stage 4 costs, or even better, just using Arturia. Just my 2 cents. Just my 2 cents. Number 3, effects modularity. This is kind of a weird one. And actually, I have 2 minds about it. It is true the Stage 4 is much more efficient when it comes to routing effects. You can, for instance, route reverb per instrument. This is to say, let's say I had a Fusion gig last night. I want no reverb on my Rhodes, none. But on my organ, I want a little bit of reverb, just to give it a little bit of like a room throw kind of thing. A sound when I hit it, I want it to kind of pop for a second. I can do that. On the Electro, I can't do that. Reverb is global. And so I only have the choice of having everything in a room verb or having nothing in the room verb completely dry. Is that the end of the world? No. And in fact, in many gigging scenarios, you kind of want everything to be a little bit washy with reverb or nothing to be a little bit washy. You're kind of miss the nuances of like, well, my Prophet has 5 on the reverb, but my piano has 2.1. Like, no one's gonna really hear that difference. They're just gonna hear if the whole thing has reverb or not. So modularity wise, yes, it is better, but in actuality, when it comes to using it on the fly in a use case scenario on a gig, I don't know if it is better. And the same thing goes for things like adjusting rate and depth of chorus. On the Electro, it's one knob, and I really, really like that, because if I want more chorus, done. I don't think about it anymore. On the Stage 4, you gotta be a little more judicious and a little more, you have to know what you want, which isn't a huge deal, but again, it's not one and done the way that it is on the Electro. This is my last reason, and I think it's kind of the worst reason, but I'm still going to include it because it's something that I remember thinking about this when I was considering these boards. Professionalism. If you show up to an arena gig, as I have done, with a single 61 key Electro, you will look out of place. You need to understand that. It's not a professional looking huge keyboard. It's a tiny, tiny, very powerful keyboard. And it doesn't look like a MIDI controller either. I'll say that because I hate that look, like laptop with an Akai, 25 key. I don't like that look at all. It looks like a keyboard, but it's not the same thing as a Stage 4. Or even a Stage 3 for that matter, which takes up some room and looks like what people traditionally think of as a keyboard. That's a keyboard. And you put that with another board stacked on top, now you're looking ready for a stadium show. So I would just say it's something to be cognizant of. Is it the biggest deal in the world? No. I really would say it is something to be thinking about if, let's say, you want to do high-paid corporate work. You want to show up and have people go, whoa, this dude's rig is really good. The Electro sort of gives a vibe of like, I travel light. And the Stage 4, I do think, conveys some amount of, this is what I do for a living. Like, this is my job. That matters. It matters. Let's be real. It's like, whoa, okay, this person has invested their time and their money into this. We can debate on if it makes you a better musician. I would argue it doesn't, but people don't really think about things in a logical way. They think about them in sort of a vapid, surface level way. And if people associate you with a bigger rig, sometimes that plays to your advantage. And sometimes it doesn't matter at all. And maybe being a real professional is knowing what gigs are what and what you should bring what to. They're all just different tools and they have different use cases. All right, and here's my 5th. I don't know if I said the last one was the final point, but this one's gonna be the final point. The pitch wheel. The pitch wheel and the pitch stick. The mod wheel and the pitch stick. That's what it is. The mod wheel and the pitch stick I don't understand for the life of me why a $2,000 keyboard doesn't have this on the Electro. I don't understand for the life of me why this is reserved for the stage. It's kind of unacceptable, to be honest. You look at Yamaha, they have a 61 keyboard and they have an 88 keyboard. They're not gatekeeping the mod and pitch wheel. That's freaking crazy to me. So yeah, that should absolutely go. Even a cheaper version doesn't need to be the nice wooden one. That's totally fine. But just a wheel version, Nord, please put this on the Electro. It's so silly that it's not there. That does make a big difference. If you plan on soloing on the sample synth section at all, you have no way of controlling the modulation, right? The vibrato of it, none. You have no way of controlling pitch bend. There is no such thing as pitch bend. That's a big deal. But again, when I was gigging, I'm not doing so much synthwave stuff, and if I did do that, I'd just bring another board for that, because maybe a synth is such an extreme thing to need that it merits having its own capabilities on its own, like a Prophet Rev 2 as opposed to just using the onboard sample synth section. Fair enough. I think I did that for like 2 gigs though, to be honest. So my argument is you really don't need it, but yeah, it does take away an entire expressive capability in terms of soloing on synth and or comping, using octave jumps, for instance, on the pitch wheel, which is something I do all the time now. Did that on a gig last night. Yeah, Nord, please give us that capability on the Electro. I know you're afraid of cannibalizing your own market, but like that is not the deciding factor. Professionals are still gonna buy the really, really nice one. They just are. So don't worry about that. It's a silly thing to withhold. So in conclusion here, and I know I said I would say what I want to from the new Electro, and I want to do that. But in conclusion here, I do want to just say this. You probably don't need a stage 4. I don't mean that condescendingly at all. I mean it in, wow, you don't need to spend $2,000 to $3,000 extra dollars. That's amazing. Just get the Electro. Get the Electro. You have the same piano sounds. You have the same organ sounds. There is literally no functional difference in terms of sound of the keyboard between these two in those 2 sections. And as far as synths go, let's say you really needed a Juno sound on your board and you have the Electro, you can do what I did, which is for years, I just used the Nord sample editor and I would bounce in samples that I made from Arturia into my keyboard. Done. Now I can carry around a venerable entire studio worth of instruments inside of this tiny 61 key keyboard that fits on my back. That's crazy, dog. That's amazing. So that's my recommendation, honestly. Get the Electro. So at the start of this, I said I would say what I want to see on Electros going forward, and here are my 3 main things. Number 1, pitch wheel. I already mentioned this. Pitch wheel, mod wheel, what are we doing? What are we talking about? It's a $2,000 keyboard. Actually, I think it's $2,800 new. It's unacceptable for it not to have that at that price point. And number 2 sort of dovetails with that. Even though it's a sample synth section, I don't think it's unreasonable to ask for a knob that's sweepable for the cutoff filter. I don't like the cutoff filter button. Now, there are upsides to the cutoff filter button. It's always consistent. I know how bright it will get when I click it on, and I know how dark it'll get when I click it off, or vice versa, whatever it is. I always know the values that it's going to jump to when I use that button, which is great for something like pads that I use all the time. I really have a good understanding of how those function. But in general, the fact I can't do a filter sweep is crazy. It's crazy. And I should be able to vary the amount of darkness on that filter based upon the patch. I just should. So that is a necessity for the Electro 7D. And the third thing I would like to see, and this is getting greedy, Nord, please make a hammer action 61 key version. Please. Technically, the range is actually better for what I do too, and I'll explain why. I actually keep my 61 keyboards an entire octave down. I'll show this with a keyboard right now. This is where a 61 key keyboard sits when it's an entire octave down. You see that low C? I use that low C and that low D flat, and indeed that low D and E flat all the time when I'm playing, comping for other people, that is. And when it's time for me to take a solo, I just push the whole keyboard up an octave to be at octave 0, and that's totally fine. Now I have all the high notes that I need. I generally don't need to get beyond that high C there. So this is great. On a 73 key, which is what I use now, it actually only goes down to that E if I'm at octave 0. But if I do it an octave below, well, now I have a bunch of notes that are just way too low to be usable, so I never do it an octave down. I keep the whole keyboard at octave 0. But look, that E doesn't go as low as the 61 key does an octave down. I know this sounds nitpicky, but it's actually not. I really miss that low C. That low C is a great sound. So yeah, I would buy a Hammer Action 61 key keyboard and use it for gigs that are just light gigs around town. Absolutely, I would. You can call it the Andre Bernier signature model if you'd like, Nord. I fully hereby grant you license to do so. Yeah, just email me, man. It's in the bio, I think. I don't know. I'm gonna pitch it to them at NAMM. They're gonna love it. Look, all this is to say, both of these are great boards. I really think you can't go wrong with either, but it is my recommendation for the vast majority of people to get the Electro. I see no reason why everybody shouldn't own an Electro. If you're a producer, if you're a guitar player that plays keys on the side, if you're a keys player that just wants something to bring around town and have it be one and done, easy to go with, these are great boards. These are great boards. And you have plenty of capability in terms of stacking things and flexibly routing things. You can use a expression pedal with, synth and organ, but not with piano. There's all sorts of things to be done with these keyboards, modularity-wise, that doesn't require you to have the flagship Stage 4. So this video has gone on too long already. Thank you so much for watching. I'm Andre Bernier. Until next time, thank you guys.